When I was 6 years old, I saw a magnificent picture in a book about the primeval forest called True Stories. It showed a boa constrictor swallowing an animal. The book said, boa constrictors swallow their prey whole without chewing it. After that, they are not able to move, and they sleep through the 6 months that they need for digestion. I pondered deeply over the adventures of the jungle and made my first drawing a boa constrictor digesting an elephant. When I showed my masterpiece to the grown-ups, they told me it looked like a hat. They couldn't see the elephant inside. I made a second drawing showing the inside, but they advised me to lay aside my drawings and devote myself to geography, history, arithmetic, and grammar instead. That is why I gave up a magnificent career as a painter and became a pilot. But I always kept my drawing number 1 with me, testing grown-ups. The answer was always, that is a hat. So I would talk to them about bridge, golf, politics, and neckties, and they would be greatly pleased to have met such a sensible man. 6 years ago, I had an accident in the Sahara Desert, 1,000 miles from any habitation. I had to repair my plane alone, with drinking water for only 8 days. The first night, I slept on the sand. At sunrise, I was awakened by a small, extraordinary voice. "If you please draw me a sheep." Before me stood a most remarkable little fellow, looking at me with great seriousness. He was not lost, exhausted, or frightened. When I told him I didn't know how to draw, he said, "That doesn't matter. Draw me a sheep." I drew my boa constrictor from the outside. "No, no, no," he cried. "I do not want an elephant inside a boa constrictor. What I need is a sheep." So he could see. I drew sheep after sheep, but none satisfied him. Finally, in frustration, I drew a box with 3 holes and said, "This is only his box. The sheep you asked for is inside." His face lit up. "That is exactly the way I wanted it." Little by little, I learned about the Little Prince's planet asteroid B 612, scarcely larger than a house. He had 3 volcanoes, 2 active, 1 extinct though, one never knows, he would say, and a problem with baobab trees. If you don't pull them up when they're small, their roots will split the planet apart. It is a question of discipline, he told me solemnly. When you've finished your own toilet in the morning, then it is time to attend to the toilet of your planet. But what troubled him most was a flower, a single rose that appeared on his planet one day. She was beautiful and proud, with 4 thorns to protect herself. She coughed, though she wasn't really sick. She demanded a screen to protect her from drafts. She wanted to be watered at precise times. The little prince loved her, but he was too young to know how to love her properly. He took her little tricks too seriously and became very unhappy. "I ought not to have listened to her," he confided to me. "One never ought to listen to the flowers. One should simply look at them and breathe their fragrance. Mine perfumed all my planet, but I did not know how to take pleasure in that." The little prince decided to leave his planet and his flower. On his journey, he visited 6 neighboring asteroids, each inhabited by a single grown-up. Asteroid 325 housed a king who claimed to rule over everything. "I do not tolerate insubordination," he said, though he was quite alone. He wanted to make the little prince his minister of justice, to judge himself. "That is the most difficult thing of all," the king said. "It is much more difficult to judge oneself than to judge others. If you succeed in judging yourself rightly, then you are indeed a man of true wisdom." But there was no one to judge. The little prince yawned and left. Asteroid 326 was home to a conceited man who wanted only to be admired. "Do you really admire me very much?" he would ask. When the little prince asked what admire meant, the man said it meant to acknowledge that he was the handsomest, best-dressed, richest, and most intelligent man on the planet. But he was the only man on his planet. "Grown-ups are certainly very odd," the little prince said to himself. Asteroid 327 contained a tippler surrounded by bottles. "What are you doing there?" asked the little prince. "I am drinking," replied the tippler gloomily. "Why are you drinking?" "So that I may forget." "Forget what?" "Forget that I am ashamed." "Ashamed of what?" "Ashamed of drinking." The little prince departed, puzzled. Asteroid 328 belonged to a businessman who was counting stars, claiming to own them all. He had been counting for 54 years. And what do you do with them? Nothing. I own them. And what good does it do you to own the stars? It makes me rich. And what good does it do you to be rich? It makes it possible for me to buy more stars, the little prince thought. The grown-ups are certainly altogether extraordinary. Asteroid 329 was the smallest of all room, only for a street lamp and a lamplighter. He was faithful to orders to light and extinguish his lamp, but his planet rotated faster and faster, now turning once every minute. That is the only one who does not seem to me ridiculous, thought the little prince. Perhaps because he is thinking of something else besides himself. Asteroid 330 was inhabited by a geographer who had never explored anything himself, waiting for explorers to report to him. When the little prince wanted to tell him about his flower, the geographer said, "We do not record flowers. They are ephemeral." What does that mean, ephemeral? It means which is in danger of speedy disappearance. The little prince suddenly felt sorry for his flower, left alone on his planet. The geographer recommended Earth. The little prince arrived in the African desert. He met a snake who spoke in riddles. "Whomever I touch, I send back to the earth from whence he came. But you are innocent and true, and you come from a star." The snake promised to help him someday if he grew too homesick for his planet. He climbed a mountain, hoping to see the whole planet and all the people at once, but he only heard his echo. How odd, he thought. On Earth, one is so lonely. He walked through the desert and came upon a rose garden, thousands of roses, all exactly like his flower. He threw himself down on the grass and wept. His flower had told him she was unique in the universe, and here were 5,000 of them,